Hey, good Tuesday afternoon to everyone. TJ Alt, I-45 now in Galveston now, along with Dr. Philip Keiser, the CEO of the Galveston County Health Authority, as well as Coastal Health and Wellness, as well as the local health authority. How do you get that all in on your business card? I have to ask you.
I've given up on business cards. I'm sorry.
We should point out, he's gotten the longer titles here the last month or so. And after taking last week off, if folks, you'll notice this a little bit in my voice, a little raspiness there, as I've got like a head cold at this point. That's what we pretty certain it is, or a flu. And I have been down and out throughout the weekend, but staying at home, following your advice, Dr. Kaiser, even though this is not COVID that we know of. I did get tested just to be sure, but that we are following all the protocols that you should do all the time, which is if you're sick, stay away from people.
Stay home. Right? It's good for you, and it's good for everybody else. I mean, you're not a hero when you come to work sick. It's good all around, and maybe you'll feel good enough to actually enjoy being home.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I wish I was the case, but that's not it. But let's get into the main updates we want to give on, particularly on COVID-19 right now, and wanted to talk to you about what's on the youth vaccines. We started those up here officially a few weeks ago. How's that going so far? And any numbers that we can provide to folks of how many have been administered and how it's going so far.
Yeah, so as of yesterday morning, we've administered about 1,800 vaccines, which is actually less than what we expected. We actually expected probably to do more than that. Initially, we thought that we would have a big demand like we've had with the other vaccines, but it's turning into a slow but steady trickle, or maybe race, but it's certainly not happening fast. One of the things we are seeing, though, is that when we have things on Saturdays and when we have things after hours, we have more people showing up. So I think that parent availability is a big deal, particularly for this age group. It's not something where the kids can go themselves. It's something where they need to have a parent take them. And I also think that a lot of parents are concerned. I've talked to parents who are fully vaccinated and whose older children are vaccinated, and they're just going, oh, but I'm scared about my babies. I just don't know yet, And so there's still a lot of worry about that. And from everything we know about this vaccine, it is safe for the kids. This is probably safer for the kids than it is in the adults. And it's been very, very thoroughly tested in children before it went to the FDA. So I think you can be confident it's not going to harm your children.
And one of the things you're looking at right now, folks, is that on the day that vaccines were first offered by the health district and UTMB clinics, we were allowed in, and these are parents of children who allowed us to come in and show this. This is all authorized by the parents themselves. We should note most of them are themselves employees of UTMB Health or the health district, and we have a story coming out on the statistics on this. This is one young man, though, we should point out at the health district. He was really scared. You watch his reaction here after the shot's done. He looked shot, and what he's really saying there is that was it. He really was scared. He does not like shots at all. And I will commend the nurse there at the right, who you see right there to the left. And then this is Aiden Cohen, who's a pretty good guitarist too, by the way.
All right.
He wanted to get vaccinated because he wanted to get out and start playing his guitar in public again.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing for him to do. But and Aiden was a trooper to let us in there and follow along as well. But it's one of those things that watching with staff dealing with kids. And it is a little bit different. They hadn't, I almost stuck around because they had these good Disney movies playing there at the health district of going along the way as well. But you said, that the numbers are not as high as you expected. But
Right.
One of the things I heard from a lot of parents was, I got vaccinated right away.
Right.
But they did take a little more time to see before they had their children vaccinated, before they made the decision. These were people early on. I've talked to a lot of folks since who have said, okay, I want to wait until some of my friends have done it, or kids that I know have done that. Are you hearing that type of feedback too? because
Yeah.
people do take extra care when it comes to dealing with kids and things.
Absolutely. People are, I'm a parent, and I know with my children, I'm always, very careful and try to be thoughtful about it. And there are risks that we would be willing to take for ourselves that we're not willing to take for our children. And I totally get that. And so it's not surprising that things are coming along a little slower than what we expected. But, we have events planned out. We still have people that are signing up for them. People are still coming to the clinic, so I think that we're making headway. This is going to be important going into the holidays. So, and that's, I think, something that's very important for parents to know, because families are going to be getting together, and the more people in the family that are fully vaccinated, the less risk there is for everybody. Some of the older folks, if they haven't gotten their booster, their immunity has waned, and so you bring a kid in who may have picked up COVID at school, who may be fine, not even know that they're symptomatic, may give it to someone else, and so we want to try and break that chain. And we're already seeing across the country in some of the northern states that the rates of COVID are increasing as the weather gets colder and the holidays are coming. And we're worried we're going to see the same thing here. And so the more people we have vaccinated means the less likely we're going to see a big bump. We probably are going to see a bump, but hopefully if we can get as many people vaccinated and as many people boosted as we possibly can, then it won't be as bad as it might be without doing that.
You mentioned in that about vaccines waning. That's been a hot topic here lately. It was
Yeah.
one to talk about with the boosters about that. An interesting thing in watching ABC's What You Need to Know, same title as our show,
Mhm.
but they were talking about even the talk of having a second booster or a fourth shot,
Yeah.
however you want to look at it. And you said that there is some indication out there based on just what's out study wise of the effectiveness of some of the vaccines based on age and the like, that you're seeing some waning a little bit faster in some
Sure.
age groups than others,
Yeah.
right?
Sure. So the first indication came in when we saw people that were immune suppressed, and people that had cancer or were on steroids or had AIDS. Their immunity, they were more likely to get COVID than other people. But there's now data out there that looks at the time from when people were vaccinated to the time when their immunity wanes, and it's really almost proportional to your age. So if you're an old geezer like me, it tends to, by about 6 months, the levels are about half of what they were before. And then and then when you start thinking about someone in their 70s and 80s, they didn't get that big bump to begin with, and then it's starting to wane, right? And so that's why it's so important for people to get boosters. I think one of the things we're seeing also is we're seeing states like California and New York saying that every adult should get a booster, and I actually would support that. And it currently in Texas, we're working under the federal government rules, and you have to fulfill certain criteria. But we take people's word for it. So when people want to get boosters, if as long as they tell us that they fall into these certain groups, it's an attestation. We say okay, and we'll go ahead and give it to them. I would rather be liberal. We have plenty of vaccine. I'd rather be liberal and give it to some people who, quote, may not need it than to tell people they have to wait and not have it when they do in fact need it.
What is the? I mean, it was understandable when the vaccines were first out
Yeah.
that we need to certain criteria of people first to kind of roll it out, get a system going. But now that this is so widespread, why do you think then that there are these restrictions that are put in to say not everybody can? I mean, let me make it clear here. Not that anyone's breaking the rules, but I think most cases they're taking people's word for it, and anyone
That's
who
right.
wants to get a booster can get it at this point.
Yeah.
But
Right.
the fact that there's not that official recommendation from the FDA or the CDC saying everybody go ahead and get the boosters, we're seeing in national news that's being debated right now. But why do you think that the federal institutes are the ones that are kind of being kind of slow to get around to that?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think one is that they honestly are trying to follow the science of it. But unfortunately, sometimes that boxes you in. So, what goes in front of the FDA and the FDA advisory board is what the company presents to them. And so the company presents to them that we've examined this in 12 to 65-year-olds at 6 months. then they only look at that data at 12 to 65-year-olds at 6 months, and they can say, well, at 6 months we don't see evidence of immunity waning in this group of people, right? However, there are other studies which, quite frankly, the FDA doesn't accept as part of their review because they were done outside of the official trial, which show us some different data. And so I think that's one issue, is that the regulatory bodies see a very, very rigid, very well-defined data set. And that's done deliberately from a safety point of view. You don't want to just take, Joe Schmo says, hey, I did this study and look, it all works great. And, so you want to make sure it's really good study. But I also think that there's some, and not all people, but I think there's some that, because of some of the things that we saw early on with as the vaccines getting done, approved, and with other things, took on this mantle of, we follow the science. We follow the science. So sometimes common sense gets lost in that. And I think the classic case of where we saw that was where the CDC director overrode the recommendations of the committee, right?
Right.
It was narrow, and she said, no. We're going to broaden this, right? And that was a good decision on her part. And I think what she was doing was she was really looking at all the broad data, not just the narrow data that was presented to that committee, and said, come on, we've got to do the common sense thing. We've got to do the right thing. If we just dig our heels in and say we're going to follow the science and wait until some of this stuff gets very, very rigorously proven, we're going to leave people by the wayside. And so she made that decision over the committee, and I think she did the right thing.
Let me ask this and get your opinion on this vaccine messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring this up because of something that we have seen instances of protest across the country. This becomes a whole. I mean, even Senator Ted Cruz got in a Twitter battle with Big Bird over this.
Over Big Bird, yeah.
And in all fairness, I understood where Senator Cruz was coming from. I mean, as well, he was like saying, "Hey," he was using Big Bird as an example to go at President Biden. Fine, and more about the mandates. He wasn't talking about Big Bird encouraging kids, but that gets lost in the message when a senator taking on Big Bird. Better watch out. There's going to be trouble. But I actually had listened to him explain what he was coming from, and his thing is that he says vaccines are good. I'm vaccinated. I've had the booster. I'm happy. But you have to make that decision yourself. And he was more about mandates and getting in there. You and I have talked about this several times. You said there have been mandates all the way through. Is it just something that this is too new to be mandating now? Or is this does follow what we've done throughout history and medical, and that the messaging has just been off base? I mean, let me take it back. Not maybe off base, but that the messaging just hasn't been consistent enough about this is good for you.
Yeah, no, I think the messaging, I think there are issues with messaging. And I think there are also, when it comes to mandates, typically they're very well defined. You have to get your children vaccinated against these diseases in order to let them come into school. Why is that? Well, because before we did that, children came, spread those diseases in school, and a lot of children had a lot of bad outcomes because of that. And then things like we're seeing right now, the battle we're seeing is, should healthcare workers be mandated? Should everybody who's an employee who has greater than 100 people be mandated? And I think what you'll find is, at least from my observation, is that generally when you have mandates, the narrower the mandate, the more successful it is. So even though the mandate in terms of having healthcare workers is being litigated in the courts right now, you don't hear a whole lot about opposition to that. Most people, when you say, do you think it's a good idea for your doctor to have a COVID vaccine so he doesn't give it to other people? Most people go, yeah, that's a good idea, right? But then the next question is, do you think everybody should be forced to have a COVID vaccine? They go, oh, wait a minute, right? And so I think, as things move forward, we can see that, the appeals courts have struck down what the mandate for every company with over 100 people, and that's working its way up to the Supreme Court, and that'll probably go to the Supreme Court. Whereas when it comes to for healthcare workers, saying healthcare workers need to be vaccinated, the courts really haven't been very sympathetic toward that, because in some ways it makes sense that there are some people that should be vaccinated and some that shouldn't. that being said, with the federal government doing this, I get daily emails from people asking advice, saying, this is what happened to me when I had a vaccine in the past. This is what happened to me when I took these medicines. Do you think that I should get the vaccine? Do you think I should, apply for an exemption? And a lot of times I read those and I go, maybe you should get an exemption. You've got a lot of things.
Yeah. In
Uh,
fact, here's one of our viewers who brought up this. She has
yeah,
missed before. She said 2 heart surgeries, 1 open chest, 1 groin injury, and
yeah,
a pig valve installed. No vaccines, no fear. God is good all the time. I've
yeah,
heard this from some folks. They are concerned. There are a good percentage, not a large percentage, but a good percentage of folks who do have concerns. And
right,
and it gets into, listen, we've encouraged it here. I'm in agreement of, when you mandate something like this, you find more people resistant than you find for it publicly.
right,
But when we look at, there was no mandate needed in Galveston County for anything, and you still got to 70% vaccination of the
right,
eligible population,
right,
and
right,
just already. And I said, okay, it worked that, but and the vaccine mandate, and I'll expand on that a little bit. Obviously, you made a good point about that when it came to forcing private companies of certain size to do that. That became something that the court said that's a step too far. But again, healthcare workers who are working with folks who are immune compromised, who are are sick on a regular basis. I've heard more people say, yeah, they should all be vaccinated.
right.
Um, Now, the flip side of that is that UTMB Health, and I know I'm going to talk in an area that I know, since they are your employer, but I do think we need to point this out. UTMB Health is facing a deadline right now
That's right.
because of the federal dollars that come
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
December 6th
yeah,
is the
yeah.
deadline for everyone to be vaccinated.
Yeah, well, it's not just UTMB Health. I mean, it's everybody that takes Medicare dollars in the country is facing that same deadline. And so, these employers are really faced with the issue of how do we get people vaccinated? How do we get to a certain spot? And if you look at the places in the states where they've done this, typically what happens is as these deadlines occur, a lot of people rush to get vaccinated because they don't want to, but they don't feel that strongly about it, right? And then a lot of people ask for exemptions, and then there's some people that just don't want to do it, and it's usually a very very small proportion of people that have been fired at other places. I think nobody likes being in this position at all. And historically, when you go back and you look at what has happened, there has always been resistance to government forcing these things. Anti-masking league back in 1918, there was a huge anti-polio vaccine movement in the 1950s, and we hear a lot of people say, "Oh, that's just because these people are stupid and these people are this one," when in fact this is part of human nature, and it takes a while for these ideas to work their way through and to percolate through. And you mentioned what we've been able to do in Galveston County. Well, on one hand, while I'm proud that we've been able to do something, and I got to tell you, it's been a lot of talking, a lot of begging, a
Yeah,
lot of
but
pleading.
my thing is
And
it
we've gradually been winning people over
right.
slowly, little by little. So it's not an easy process. It's a very very long and hard process. And there's some people that we will never win over. And I
Well, and I bring that up because we talk about the messaging
yeah,
again on that, is that yes, you've had to beg and you had to plead and and do shows like this and the
hmm
like to get the
yeah,
word out, but you'd still be having to do that a lot harder, I think, if there was a mandate in place. Let's just say that we didn't have the state government we
yeah.
had and didn't have the local county government we had, that mandates were issued and to be vaccinated. I think you'd still have a lot harder fight in many ways, instead of kind
Maybe
of winning hearts and minds.
right,
And
right.
war
Yeah,
college will tell you,
yeah. Maybe
win
I was
hearts and
actually
minds and you win the war.
no. I was actually listening to a New York Times podcast about public health officials, and they talk about this one public health official in a small county in a state I won't mention, not Texas, and and as time went on through the pandemic, things got worse and worse and worse, and this person's job got harder and harder, and I kept thinking, why do you keep fighting with your elected leaders? And that's one thing that I think we've done a good job of, in that we have communicated with our elected leaders. They've communicated with us. I think we understand where everybody's coming from. We understand what the ground rules are coming from the governor, and you have to accept the reality that you have. Benjamin Franklin said, "Politics is the art of the possible." And so, if it's not realistic, to say that, well, that's not right, you should mandate this, or you should order people to do that, and they have no desire to do that, that's not going to get you anywhere. I mean, you should have those conversations behind closed doors, and then you come out and you say, okay, this is where we are, and that's how you move forward. And so I'm very happy that we have the leadership that we have, that's been very, very supportive and very, very helpful. But it's also been a two-way street. I'm also very careful not to put them in bad positions, just like they're careful not to put the health department in bad positions.
Well, and I think though too, it comes into not making absolutes about things.
Yeah.
I point this out as much as a knock that Galveston County Judge Mark Henry took over some decisions he made, or actually the lack of decisions, I should say. He was, I'm not going to put a mask mandate in. I'm not going to do this or that. He was delivering masks to businesses in the county. Said, I personally, have my qualms about this, but I'm also not going to stand in the way if if a local business wants to do this and we have the resources to help them, we're going to do it.
That's right. And I think part of the confusion comes from is that, the judge, I think, has some very deeply held political convictions, among which is personal choice. But on the other hand, if you choose to get vaccinated, not only is he not going to stand in your way, he's going to help you do it, right?
Right.
And the same thing in terms of making sure that supplies of PPE were available, and that anything we needed was available. And so, if people chose not to do it, that's okay. And if people chose to do it, great. And I think that we've been unique in that respect, and I feel very fortunate because of that.
Dr. Philip Keiser on with us, as he does on a regular basis, talking about things mainly COVID related, but now talk a little bit about flu shots. Are they safe with COVID-19 vaccine? In fact, my wife today is trying to get both at the same time. And I've asked you this question before on that. But what I know we've talked about this, but there are folks who are concerned. It's like, well, if I get a flu shot, do I need the COVID-19? If I get the COVID-19, do I really need the flu shot?
Yeah.
And the answer, I guess, is, well, you probably should have both.
Yes, no, you need to get both. They're different viruses, and we're beginning to see flu cases go up. Not a lot, but you need a different vaccine to keep you from getting flu. And the flu vaccine is not as good as the COVID vaccine. I mean, if you get a flu shot, it's only about 50% effective in keeping you from getting the flu. But like the COVID vaccine, it's very effective in keeping you from getting hospitalized or dying. And so we see that with the COVID vaccine as well. They're two different vaccines. They work totally by different mechanisms. And we want you to get both. I've had both of mine. And you can get them both on the same day. No problem.
And I need to clarify, my wife's getting her booster. She's just now not getting around to the COVID shot. That's her booster. She did hold off on that for a little while, but is now getting her booster shot and her flu shot at the same time. Now, as I explained at the beginning of the show, I am normally one of those who waits until that late November, December before I get my flu shot, because I kind of want to see what's kind of going for flu. Well, it sounds like I may have waited too long at this point. As I come down, as I said, I've had a COVID test and a flu test, and waiting for the results of both of those. But pretty certain this is not COVID. Had that, and it doesn't feel anything like that, obviously. And I'm vaccinated, had my booster as well. Follow all of your protocols as best as I can in the news media business, but there is a concern there for folks of saying, well, but if someone were like my wife were going in and getting both on the same day, is that okay?
Yeah, it's not a problem. We were concerned about it initially, and we didn't know. But now there's actually, studies that have shown you can give them at the same time without anybody have any problems. Look at that. Somebody's telling you, get your flu shot.
Yeah, and I agree with you, William. As I said, I'm gonna, but it's not real good to get one once you've had it during the time. You got to wait a little bit and then go and get it. But yes, is again. But I'm an example of someone who, waits and then sure enough, it comes and bites me out there. Although, as I said, I'm pretty certain that's what I'm dealing with. We don't know for sure yet, but that's why I rely on my doctor to tell me what's wrong with me than me trying to figure out what's wrong with me. Dr. Google and I don't get along too well out there, and so and um, hey, Doreen is back. One of our big fans. She got a shooting COVID booster at the same time. Is still waiting for her 5G signal to improve.
Me
That,
too.
that last line is a joke. That's we should point that out. That is a joke from Doreen. Thank you, Doreen. I made the same joke myself, and some people took me seriously. That dealing with some of the kind of the weird things we hear out there from folks. And then I wanted to talk to you too about the COVID-19 pill that
Yeah.
Pfizer is talking about. Two things on that. First, I'll talk about it. It gets into what we talk about vaccines and then treatments
Right.
out there. One of the things is that vaccines early on get developed, and it's the best case until you can get a treatment plan in place too. And a lot of folks who are anti-vaccine, and I say anti-vaccine not in a mean way, but it's just, hey, listen, I don't want to go to vaccine right now.
Yep.
I want to focus on what to do if I do get it.
Yep.
And they bring the numbers to me. They said only less than 1% die, only this much percent get in there.
Yep.
I said, gotcha. Yep. Totally understand where you're coming from. Those folks I actually never get in a long discussion with. I said, totally where you're getting from. But this is good news because Merck announced their pill. Now
Yep.
Pfizer has theirs. And we have obviously antibody treatments
Yep.
that you can get in a pill form as well, by the way, correct?
Well, it's not a pill form; it's a shot.
Shot. I should say.
You can
You
get
have
an
the shot.
infusion where you get an IV and hangs down and goes into your vein, or you can get a shot, but it's not just one shot. You got to get four. So
Four
1,
shots.
2,
I'm sorry.
3,
Yeah, I should have
4.
said pill.
Yeah.
And that was me, that you could get the IV where it gets it all in your system
Yep.
at one time, or you do the 4 shots.
Yep, that's right.
Along the way. But as we go along the lines here, I'm seeing more and more updates of companies like Pfizer, like Merck, and like who are really focusing their efforts on once you get it, here's what we're going to give you to help you.
Oh yeah.
That'll
Yeah,
keep
that's
you
going
out
to be
of
a real game changer. No, we're really looking forward to those pills being available because I think it's going to be a real game changer. Obviously, we want to get people vaccinated. We want as many people vaccinated as possible. But then when people do get sick, it'll be so much easier just to go, here's your pill, and go take these for 5 days and you'll be fine. And the Merck pill, which will be probably the first one that comes to market, probably very early part of next year, reduces the chance of hospitalization by about 50%. The Pfizer pill reduces that chance of hospitalization by 90%. That's as good as a vaccine, and that's as good as the antibody infusions. So now we've got a whole series of therapies in our arsenal that we can use. And it'll be much easier because people aren't going to have to make an appointment at UTMB or find a doctor who will give them the injections. They'll be able just to go to their doctor anywhere, get tested for COVID, get the medication right away. That'll do two things. One, it'll not only make them feel better, it'll help reduce the amount of virus in people's nose that's coming out, which means they won't be infectious for as long a period of time, which will also help interrupt the cycle. So now if you've got a bunch of people vaccinated and the people that do get sick don't have as much virus coming out of their nose, we're going to see these rates go way down.
And that again too, that's the progress too. I think it's amazing that we have a pill, much like the vaccine is one thing, but now we have these pills that are going to be available on the market in less than 2 years.
Yeah,
I don't think we would have ever seen that any other time in previous medical history.
No, we haven't. I mean, this is the equivalent of the Manhattan Project, and people need to realize this. It took them 3 years to take what science they knew, which had been around for a long time, just like with the COVID vaccines, and put it together. We put the COVID vaccines together in about a year, and now we're getting pills to treat it in another year. So we've never seen the medical science move this quickly. And part of it is because there is a pandemic and there's a will behind it and there's money behind it. But also, I think it really speaks to the way just our medical technology has advanced. And I think we can expect to see these with other disease states in the future.
And one of the other things about Pfizer is they announced today. Of course, Pfizer had made their announcement last week about the pill, but they announced today that they're also going to share the license
Right.
in poor countries
That's
so that
right.
the pill is more readily available.
Yeah.
How important is that going to be in any? Because we're dealing with something that's worldwide, not
Yeah.
an isolated
Yeah, no, that's going to be
country or
critically
another.
important because we can do everything we can to keep the virus levels down here in the United States. But as long as there's international air travel and people are traveling, the virus is going to come to the United States. And so far we've seen the UK variant. So far we've seen the Indian variant. We don't know what other variants are going to make it to our shores, but it would surprise me if something else comes. Down in South America, they don't call it the Peruvian variant or the South American variant, but there's a Lambda variant down there, which is different. That could make it to our shores as well. So being able to vaccinate people in the developing world is going to be important. But unfortunately, the vaccines that we currently have don't transport well, and they don't last a long time. So what they're doing now is a model that really was developed in the HIV epidemic, and that is to actually license these drugs to poor countries who don't have the money to buy these medicines anyway. So Pfizer's not losing any money by selling
Right.
them or allowing them to be made in these countries, and then allow them to be spread throughout these countries, and we'll probably end up using a very similar distribution network that was used with the HIV epidemic. And I think we've learned a lot from that. So we build on one public health intervention to another, and we continue to get better at it.
Question now from Michael Marketel out of Friendswood asking this: is any intention of an uptick mid-January? We've seen across the country, we've seen a lot of states, 22, I think was the last count, going up with COVID cases and
Yeah,
hospitalizations. A lot of more breakthrough percentages also
yeah,
happening in those states, which has brought up the booster discussion. But holidays are coming up. I showed you Aiden Cohen earlier. One of the
hmm
reasons he really wanted to get the vaccine is his family's going to travel by plane
hmm
for the Thanksgiving holidays next week. And that's one of the reasons he wanted to be vaccinated and
yeah,
gets a second shot around Thanksgiving
yeah.
there. So he'd have some form of protection before going out. But we got the holidays coming. This was a concern last year. We
hmm
did see a January uptick
I think
in
we
that.
will.
What do you anticipate this time around?
Yeah, I think we will. I don't think there's any doubt that we'll see that. I mean, we're already seeing this happening in some of the northern states, and their rates are beginning to double pretty quickly. And so we're going into Thanksgiving, and then we're going to follow that by Christmas. We're going to follow that by New Year's, and sure enough, what we really can expect to see as time goes on is probably another peak in January. The question is how not it isn't to me will we see another surge in January. Its question is how big it will be and how long it will last. So I'm hopeful that as we get more and more people with booster shots, and we would encourage everybody, if you haven't gotten your booster shot, please go ahead and get your booster shot. Come on over to the health department. Business is slowed down. We can do this afternoon. And I sound like a used car salesman, don't I? I sound like Mattress Mac. Come on over. And so that plus getting children vaccinated will help just reduce those numbers of people that are susceptible, and hopefully we won't see as big a surge. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bump.
And if you want to find out more about we'll put the link in as we always do. If you want to find out about getting the boosters or a vaccine, if you haven't done so yet, you can do so at the Galveston County Health District website, or if through an UTMB clinic, or quite frankly, you can go to any CVS pharmacy
Yeah,
or Walgreens around too. They
yeah,
have the doses now as well for children. And I mentioned those because of the big national chains, but I do know
yeah,
that a lot of our locally owned pharmacies are doing that as well,
yeah.
where you can go in and get it. So the availability of vaccines out there now, as I said, we've mentioned the Pfizer pill and the Merck pill. Those are not on the market yet. Those have not reached approval yet. But as you heard from Dr. Keiser, expect those to be real game changers
Mhm.
as they come along. as well. Dr. Philip Keiser has been on with us today, as he does on a regular basis. We try to do this once a week. When we can't, we just push it off since it's Thanksgiving next week. I'm going to wish you now a happy Thanksgiving. We'll let you have
You too.
Thanksgiving holiday off, and we'll talk again right after the holiday about things. Obviously, as you know, we want to encourage folks to get their flu shot. I will go and get mine as soon as I'm over whatever this round of crud I've got now. I am staying home. I am hydrating as I'm supposed to. This out there. So, but yeah, I'm one of those. I held off like I normally do anyway, but this time it came up and got me pretty good in waiting. And you know, as I said, it's when you take your doctor's advice, you do well. When you don't, you tend not to do well, and that's
That's
what I
right.
did. So that's a lesson learned right here in front of you, folks. Thanks again for coming on with us, Dr. Keiser. We appreciate it. If you have any questions you'd like us to ask Dr. Keiser, again, we're going to take next week off for sure for Thanksgiving, but we'll be back the first week in December as well. This has been What You Need to Know with Dr. Philip Keiser. We do appreciate you all watching, and keep up with the latest of the updates here on I-45 Now in Galveston.